I had a creepy dream last night. I had a dream that my friend Tanner died in a fatal car accident. It it almost felt real. It I could not believe when I woke up that it was a dream. It it was scary. It was weird. I don't know how to interpret it. I don't know what I should do. I don't know if I should tell Tanner about this dream because it really felt so real. So, when I got up and got dressed and went to work, I told him about my dream, about how he got in his car after waking up and saying goodbye to his family and telling his wife he loves her. He got in his car, drove down the road, got on the highway, and crashed into a semi. He looked at me and he was like, "Dude, you're just making things up. It's just a dream. I have nothing to worry about." And I was like, "Really? Do you think so?" He's like, "Yeah. Don't even worry about it." I was like, "All right." So I did my usual stuff. I went through work and I went to the bar afterwards, hung out with Tanner and James and Alexander. And then went home to my wife and kids, had dinner, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a phone call from Tanner's wife saying that he had died in a fatal car accident after he left for work. I'm scared. I don't know what to do anymore. We planned his funeral, and that was it. Or I thought it was it. Until the other night, I had a dream that one of my friends, Caitlin, drowned in the middle of a lake. And once again, it felt so real. I talked to Caitlin as soon as I could, and I told her, I said, "Do not go to the lake. Whatever you do not set foot near a lake for the next month." But Caitlin doesn't always like to listen. She likes to do her own thing. She likes to rebel against people. So you know what she did that night? She went to the lake. There was a party. She went to it. And I woke up the next morning, and Caitlin was gone. She had drowned in the middle of that lake. I could not tell what was dream and what was reality after this point. I gathered my friends up, James, Alexander, and Sierra, the only ones that were left. And I told them about these dreams I've been having. I told them that I dream about them dying, and then it happens a few days later. I didn't want to alert them, but there was no other way if I wanted to keep them. Sierra didn't believe me. She thought I was making things up, and she didn't really like it. She told me that it was cruel and heartless that I was making these jokes after the two deaths we already had. And I told her, "Sierra, you don't understand. I've seen these things, and they do happen." But she still did not want to believe me. She ran off, and she went home that night. James and Alexander believed me. They stayed at my place because they were too scared to go home. So they rode back with me, and they stayed at my place that night. And when I went to sleep, I had another dream. I had a dream that Sierra, poor Sierra, was shot and killed in an alley while being mugged. She is not the most bright person, not the most brightest of people, and she is very attractive, so I saw this one very likely to come true. I told James and Alexander that we needed to find her and to tell her about this dream before it came true. We called her and called her and called her several times, but she never once answered her phone. We thought it might have already happened. So we drove to her apartment and we knocked on the door. We pounded and pounded until she answered. Luckily, she was just asleep. Whoever sleeps at 3 p.m. is beyond me, but we didn't question it. We were just happy she was still with us. We told her about the dream, and she still thought we were joking. We told her that we were serious. We did not want her to go out, and so we stayed at her place. We made sure she was not leaving because we weren't going to lose her. So we stayed the night. We ordered pizza to make sure we didn't have to get out and get food. And I'll be honest with you, I was scared to sleep that night because I didn't know what I was going to dream. I didn't want to dream somebody else's death anymore. I just wanted to have a normal dream. Unfortunately, I'm not the most lucky guy in the world. That night I had the same dream about Sierra. I woke up in the middle of the night. It was 2 a.m. and Sierra was not in the apartment. I ran out the door and ran down to the nearest alley to her house to make sure she was not dead. And she wasn't. She was severely injured in her alley. She was shot in the stomach. She was crying and screaming, and I called 911 as soon as possible. Luckily, she got to the hospital in time to be saved. Could we prevent these deaths? Could we stop them from happening? I didn't know, but I was willing to try. So that night, I had another dream. It was James this time. James, you kind of have to know him. He's an addict to the strip club. He likes to go a lot. And in my dream, he was at the strip club and he died by 2 bodyguards throwing him out, and he walked backwards, being drunk, into the street and was run over by a car. So James was going to have to fix his addiction very quickly or he was going to die. We told him that he could not go to the strip club anymore. He couldn't even leave the apartment without one of us with him. And as so, he didn't. He stayed right with us all one night. The next night, he snuck out, went to the strip club, and he died. He died that night. In the same scenario, run over by a car after being kicked out. I couldn't deal with the pressure anymore of trying to save my friends. I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want these dreams anymore. They're too much to handle. I was stressing out. I'm growing gray hairs. I'm going insane myself, having these dreams. They're making me want to kill myself, for I don't have them anymore. That night, I had the dream about Alexander. In my dream, he was kidnapped, taken to a barn, and tortured to death. He was cut up limb by limb, still alive, until he died from bleeding out. I didn't want to see these things anymore. I had to try to save Alexander. He was my last hope. So that night, I stayed with him the whole time. I didn't leave him. He didn't leave my sight. And when the time came, a big, muscular, creepy guy pushed me out of the way and grabbed him, threw him in his van, and sped away. I had failed my duty. I ran to my car and followed him as quick as possible. I followed directly behind him until he went to this barn. As soon as he got out and knew I was behind him, he threw shots at me. He was firing at me. I did not have a weapon. I didn't know what to do. I ran and I tackled him. He shot me in the arm, but I had to try to save Alexander. He was the only one left, and I wasn't gonna let him die. I grabbed his gun, and he was out of bullets, and so I just beat him and beat him over and over with the hilt of his gun. I kept beating him in the face, and his nose started to bleed, his eyes started to bleed. I kept beating him until I couldn't resemble his face anymore, because I was not going to let this happen. After his face looked like a jumbled mess, I stopped and I started to cry on top of him. Was it over? Were the dreams finally over? God, I hope so. I grabbed Alex and I took him home. I checked on Sierra in the hospital and made sure she was alright. And then I went home to my wife and kids. told them I loved them, and I went to sleep. I had one last dream, and it was about me.